Okay, everybody, hi and welcome back. I'm Faith Brunel and welcome back to the Faith Brunel's Insights podcast. Today we are joined by the lovely Natasha. Hi, Natasha, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm well, thank you. And I'm rearing to go to kick off season 6 and episode 4 of the Faith Brunel's Insights podcast. So, Natasha, I hand over to you briefly before I delve into the questions that I have prepared here today. So, could you introduce yourself briefly to the listeners for us, please?
Of course. Hi, my name is Natasha Shatunde. I am a barrister at Garden Court Chambers. I'm
Mhm.
also the lucky recipient of an honorary Doctor of Laws from Anglia Ruskin University. I am the co-founder and chair of the Black Barristers Network. I also am an elected member of the Bar Council. I sit on its Equality, Diversity and Social Mobility Committee, as well as its race working group, soon to be race panel. I also sit on the EDI committee at Lincoln's Inn. I'm also a associate lecturer at Goldsmiths University.
Fabulous, Natasha. What a wonderful content that you have set there briefly for us. There's lots to get stuck into. Unfortunately, we can't get into everything due to the constraints of time, but I know that I'm going to endeavour to get as much out of you as possible in terms of your wonderful and your inspirational journey. So let's kick off the interview then with a couple of questions. The first question I want to get into is a question you haven't actually had, but as a barrister, can you talk to us about why you chose Garden Court Chambers and also kind of tips for aspiring barristers in choosing a chambers?
Well, I actually started off a different chambers called Facets in Andrews Hill. I did pupillage there, and I stayed there as a tenant for a number of years. I think my total time there was around 5 years, and then I moved to Garden Court Chambers. I moved to Garden Court Chambers for a change.
Yeah.
I moved because I really wanted to be in a place where there was more diversity in respect of its members. And yeah, I find that at Garden Court. In terms of tips for aspiring barristers,
Yeah.
I think for me, the bar has become very much an area where people expect juniors to specialize or know what they practice areas they want to do early. Um, I think that can be a bit dangerous because, in my opinion, you only really know what really suits you and your personality when you actually start doing the work. So initially, before I started at the bar, when I was at university, I really enjoyed land law as a subject. Excuse me one second. Can we pause this?
Yeah. Recording.
Okay, so I previously was at a different chambers. I was
Mm-hmm.
at 5 St Andrews Hill. I did my pupillage there, and then I stayed there as a tenant for some time. I think the total amount of time I stayed there was about 5 years, and then I moved to Garden Court in February 2020. In terms of why I wanted to change, I wanted to move to a different set, one with more people that look like me and
Mm-hmm.
more diversity generally. In respect of tips for aspiring barristers, what I will say is that chambers can often expect aspiring barristers to have a concrete idea of what practice area they want to be working in. And I think that can sometimes be a bit unfair and also unwise because I think you only really know what suits you
Mm-hmm.
once you practice in those areas.
Yes.
So I look back to where when I was at university, I was really, really interested and enjoyed property. Landlord was like one of the most interesting areas. I hated crime. Those sorts of human areas, I was just like, no. And I was
Mm.
also thinking to myself, when I go into the bar, I want to make money, like real money.
At least you're honest.
Um, yeah, I know. And then I ended up applying initially to those sorts of sets and
Mm.
not even getting looking for interviews. And then in my third and final year of applying, I applied to more mixed sets,
Yeah.
which did mixed areas and ended up at 5 St Andrews Hill. The pupillage was predominantly crime, but I
Mm-hmm.
also had the opportunity to do other areas like family, like landlord and tenant, like a bit of insolvency,
Yeah.
and a bit of other sort of civil areas.
Mm.
And I found from that actually one of my skills is people,
Yeah.
working with people, speaking to people,
Mm-hmm.
having people skills. And that made me realize that perhaps dealing with the more nitty-gritty sort of areas of law that touch upon people's personal lives and their liberty and their ability to have look after their children was something that was probably a bit more suited to me.
For you.
So I would say, if I would give advice to aspiring barristers, is if you're not 100% sure on what practice area you're interested in, fear not. Apply to some mixed sets and see what actually suits you. But of course, in the application forms, you need to show that you, or demonstrate that you at least have an understanding and an appreciation of the areas.
And that makes sense, Natasha, really, because that's the importance of work experience and trying things out before you dive, before you basically dive into the deep end of something. It's good to be in the shallow end and have a kind of have a knowledge, have an experience of something before you make that final choice and decision. And really kind of segues into your your role that you mentioned in your context when you're talking about your roles as the chair of the Black Barristers Network. So what initiatives or strategies do you advocate to foster both diversity and inclusion actually in the legal profession as a whole?
There are some. They come in part from being the chair of the Black Barristers Network, but they also come from my work at the Bar Council.
Yeah.
I think before, when I came up with the idea to the Black Barrister work, the bar and the legal profession generally was focused a lot on gender. It completely ignored race. And after the death of George Floyd, that's when a focus on race came to the fore, and people started thinking about ideas. Yeah, there was a seismic shift. I think it's really unfortunate that it had to be the death of someone for that to happen. But we're here now. In terms of strategies and initiatives, it's really tough to pinpoint one thing. I think the main thing that's needed is what some people might term a culture change, to be polite. And in order to do that, really that requires a lot of self-learning and self-reflection from everybody. We all have our biases, we all have our prejudices, we all stereotype. And I think that needs to be personally acknowledged by people. I think it means challenging yourself. And I think it means learning a lot about it, reading books, thinking, having conversations, ideally not just with Black people. Having a wider perspective, of course, and recognizing our humanity. Training can also assist in respect of diversity and inclusion, but in particular in regards to specific topics. I think a lot of the time people do training which is just supposed to try and cover everything, which I think there's not enough time to be able in any training session to cover all protected characteristics. So when it comes to race, having specific ones, not just in respect of race, but also in respect of different races, because people will see Asian people differently from how they see Black people, from how they see others, if you see what I'm saying, travelers, for example. So I think specific training is necessary as well. And I think with that, it needs to be, the participants need to be courteous and aware of the fact that some of the things that they may say would be particularly harmful and difficult for those who are of minorities to sit in and hear. So there needs to be a lot of ground rules in respect of that training. Other things for the bar in particular would be the monitoring of the allocation of work. But when I say monitoring, because a lot of people say monitoring, I don't just mean just like collecting the data. You need to analyze it internally. You need to publish it internally as well, and try and reflect on it and create changes as and when are necessary. The thing about the bar, for those who don't know, especially the self-employed bar, is that we don't really know enough about how people decide to instruct, and also how, as in instruct barristers, and also how clerks sort of market us to solicitors when inquiries come in for cases. And that's where not just the monitoring, but the publicizing of that data is really important. All chambers are meant to monitor particularly unallocated work that comes in. So work that comes in where it's like, hi, I'm looking for a barrister to cover this hearing, rather than, hi, I'm looking to instruct Natasha Shatunde, is she available?
Right, yeah.
And
more broader
yeah,
in that respect. Yeah.
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 So
Well, that's
all
interesting,
chambers are
Natasha.
supposed to,
Hmm.
yeah, it is. I mean, all chambers are supposed to do it, but um for those that do, they don't always publish the data to all members so that they know how things are going in chambers, how things are going for them as well. When you deal with things in silos and just look at your own practice, you have no idea what kind of work other people are getting and what you're potentially missing out on.
I think that's quite interesting, actually, if we can just pivot there in terms
Yeah.
of having a look at the foundational principles, as you know, in terms of how things are conducted. I think making people aware of that can give them a kind of broader sense of what's going on in terms of their profession and in that particular space. And it's interesting you're
Yeah.
talking about obviously your experiences as well, and looking at the strategies and the approaches. And it's good that you were talking about it's not just one strategy; it's about implementing these strategies in kind of in a range of different contexts with a range of different people who bring differing perspectives. But I just want to ask you a couple more questions, really, just piggybacking off your work. But if you want to, feel free to finish what you were saying, and then I'll jump in with the following questions.
There's just a couple more things I wanted to mention briefly.
Okay.
Target setting as well. I think
Mm-hmm.
chambers, I think the bar as a whole, and I think the legal profession as a whole needs to set targets in terms of how they want to, and the judiciary, sorry, as well, need to
Yeah.
set targets and how they want things to change in respect of diversity,
Mm-hmm.
and work towards those targets. And if they don't meet those targets, they need to be able to justify why. I
Why? Yeah.
think within chambers, the promotion of barristers is important as well. And when I say promotion, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
who are you having on your panels of
Mm-hmm.
training or webinars or seminars that you're doing to solicitors? Who are you putting forward in that sense, and highlighting and showcasing? Marketing, who are you promoting out there on social media platforms and via emails, those sorts of things. And then another one is, often the legal directories are used as markers or indications of barristers and how good they are. I think they need to be reviewed. I think we need to look at how they work, how they choose people, whether there are any biases in that as well, because there aren't that many, there are not, certainly not enough barristers of color and black barristers in
Yeah.
particular on those
Yeah.
territories.
Thank you, Natasha, for your honesty, really, and for talking about your experience and the things that really need to happen in order to make the bar more diverse as well. As a Black female aspiring barrister, these changes are very, very welcoming to myself as well, just so that we can have a wider kind of range of perspectives coming into the bar as well, and making space for each of these perspectives. So, just talking about pupillage, because you mentioned pupillage before when you were talking about your move away from one chamber to another. Can you share some valuable tips or strategies for really, for aspiring barristers for seeking pupillage, and what key advice would you offer to, for them to navigate through this very competitive landscape?
Oh, okay. So to get pupillage, I would say that you should try and I think there's two pieces of advice that I would give. One piece of advice would be in terms of work experience or like actual paid work that you do, try and get something
Yeah.
that is as close to the role as a barrister as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that involves advocacy of any form, promoting the rights of others, standing
Yeah.
for something, orally or in written form. I
Mm-hmm.
think those things are great. Look at other work that you've done and the transferable skills that you get there, and do not do not forget the fact that people skills are really important
Yeah.
at the bar. In respect, and then the second piece of advice I'd give is, in particular, when it comes to answering the why us, why our
Yeah.
chambers kind of section. I used to find that very difficult when I was applying.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do now, if I was to do things differently, would be to align myself with these chambers as much as I can.
Yeah.
So a lot of us still do webinars, for example, sign up to them
Mm-hmm.
and then go and watch them. And then you can write about how amazing that webinar was and that you were really impressed by hearing Natasha Shatunde speak about child abduction or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might be that's something to show that you've not only just looked at the website to see what the website says
Yes.
and the cases that have been done, but you've actually sort of gone in and actually, watched us speak, meet us as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think those would be my top tips.
Excellent, Natasha. That's really, really good practical advice and tips about not just reading the website, but actually having a practical and hands-on approach to really kind of becoming more aware of the chamber before you delve in and before you do obviously make that application for pupillage, because the bar is very competitive. Law as a whole is very competitive, but you have to find a way to stand out. So this is where my next question really kind of stems from. It's about talking about the specific qualities or experiences that chambers typically look for in candidates during the pupillage application process. And really, if you can provide any tips on how they can really showcase any kind of any transferable skills they have or anything that they've done, up to that point, that would really make them stand out as an aspiring barrister.
I think using the STAR method where possible can help. So, not just sort of listing what you did, record keeping, diary management, or whatever it was that you may have done in a specific job. If you can kind of, if you think about, if you just have a list of the skills that you believe a barrister needs, then have a look at your experiences and look at which one of those sort of demonstrates those skills. And if you have any examples that you can specifically use that shows that you have those skills, then write out those examples, I think would be helpful. Situation, task, action, results.
Excellent. I was going to ask you that.
As possible.
I was actually going to ask you what the acronym stood for, so I'm glad you've slotted that in there.
Yeah, so that they can sort of see that, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm going on this journey with her in the story, and I can see that she definitely demonstrates this particular skill that you need to be a barrister.
Excellent. So thank you, Natasha, for your honesty, for your kind of your insights, for your highlights about your journey as a for your journey as a barrister. It's been very, very interesting to hear about that. And just really one final question about pupillage is talking about what are some fundamental elements that aspiring barristers often overlook or underestimate when they're actually preparing their applications for pupillage, and then are there any particular strategy that you personally employed when actually trying to navigate this competitive landscape and being successful in that endeavor?
I think sometimes people forget there's a tendency that we have when we're writing anything really, where if you write a sentence that sounds really cool and really flowery, you kind of hold on to it and you don't want to delete it when the word count is telling you need to get rid of something. I think you need to really think about what the reader needs to hear, rather than just what sounds nice on the paper. You also need to remember that barristers are the ones that are reading these applications. We're doing it for free. We're not doing it paid. We're doing it in the middle of the night whenever we can find a bit of time. So therefore, we're reading them quite quickly. And if they're boring, they're going to go in the bin. So you need to just make sure that they are interesting and they're hitting the points in respect to the kind of qualities that you need to demonstrate as a barrister. Another thing is with the why the bar question as well, really think about why. Some people have some amazing and sometimes devastating sort of past experiences that has made them want to consider a career at the bar and to consider particular practice areas. Don't feel shy in respect of putting those in. If you feel comfortable enough to include those, then I think you should, because it shows a real passion for the profession.
Excellent, Natasha. Thank you very much again for your insights as well. I have no doubt that this will definitely be very, very helpful and beneficial for aspiring barristers. And just finally, how can the listeners contact you after the show is ended?
I'm on LinkedIn. If you just search for my name, and similarly as well on Twitter, I think my handle is nshatunde. You can come and find me there. I don't really use Instagram, so it's going to be those two platforms.
Excellent, Natasha, no problem. And I just want to make a few mentions about your successes. So I know that you are an honorary doctor, you are an honorary doctor of laws, and I know that you are a public speaker, and I also know that you are, as we mentioned before, the chair of the Black Barristers Network and the other things that you mentioned in your content. So although unfortunately you don't have enough time to delve into all of them, I just wanted to make mention of them because it would be remiss of me not to mention the successes that you've had as a barrister and really how you're really helping to inspire other aspiring aspiring barristers and students. So Natasha, thank you. And thank you to the listeners for coming on to the Faith Brunel's Insights podcast. I'm Faith Brunel today, and I hope that you've really enjoyed season 6, episode 4. And without further ado, as I always say at every episode, it's not an event, it's a journey. This is your host, Faith Brunel, and I'm signing off. Have a great week and stay productive. Bye-bye.